Welcome to Human Design Center. I'm glad that we share a common interest in human design, the science of differentiation, the art of living your life according to your unique design and genetic matrix that sustains it. Today, you are going to learn or recap, as the case may be, about Hexagram 7, the Army, the role of the self in interaction. Hexagram 7 is part of third trimester of Jupiter, trimester of duality, where we accomplish our purpose through relationships, connections, co-creating in relationships according to mystical theme, measure for measure. Gate 7 corresponds to God, TOTH, the god of the moon, the god of writing, wisdom, and magic. Gate 7 flows within the collective logic circuit, which is about future, sharing, understanding, projecting into the future, visualizing, about patterns, about being focused. Keyword in collective circuit, sharing. Zodiac sign of Leo. The opposite gate is number 13, the listener. Relevant organ, diaphragm. Amino acid, valine. Center, G center, magnetic monopole, regarding identity, direction, love. Tarot card associated, Four of Swords. The harmonic gate is number 31, influence of leadership, being part of the projected channel 31, and 7, the channel of the alpha, a design of leadership, for better or for worse. Gate 7, in 3rd trimester, in TOTH, forms the channel with Gate 31, located in the 2nd trimester of form and civilization, connecting to MOAT archetype. This way, amino acid valine associated with Gate 7 communicates with amino acid tyrosine of Gate 31, so that the channel of the alpha is formed between TOTH and MOT, coming out of their relationship the design of leadership, for better or for worse. It is relevant for the value and functioning of this 7th gate to observe that amino acid valine is the same for the gates 7, 4, 29, 59, all of them within the castle of the same god, Thoth. Valine cannot be found in any other trimester or deity, except for Thoth, helping him to have a connection with the moon, to take care of the magic in our life, to get wisdom, to master writing abilities. Valine is one of 9 essential amino acids. The human body cannot create it, which is why it must be obtained from what you eat. Valine is not hard to get it in your diet by consuming protein-rich food, such as grass-fed beef, wild-caught salmon, yogurt, seeds, including sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, flax seeds and chia seeds, and quinoa. Also, nuts, like pistachios, cashews, and almonds, just to name a few sources. In addition to promoting muscle growth and tissue repair, another function of valine is its ability to support both muscle coordination and mental strength while promoting an emotionally calm state. It is also key to optimal growth in children. It is a precursor in the penicillin biosynthetic pathway. Gate 7, the point of convergence. By design, the need for leadership to guide and order society. This is one of the Sphinx gates and essentially, in many ways, the most influential. This is a gate that leads to the gate of influence. The channel formed by gates 31 and 7 is the first channel that is initiated in the intrauterine development of a human being. So, this channel has particular importance. When look at the circuitry of logic, you can see the deep limitations that are built into the logic system, even though they are so important to us. The limitation is that it is very difficult for logic to get access to energy. The logic system from the throat does not have a direct channel access to a motor. The throat to the G center or to the splenic center does not provide a motor, which is why we end up in the logic system with all kinds of committees and all kinds of discussions and research. Experimentation is the goal of the logical process, and so, unlike the 13th gate, which is there to look backwards and to accumulate past experience for the advantage of society, the seventh gate looks out of the window of the car into the future. It is saying, this is a straight road. It seems that everything is going to be okay for the next couple of 100 kilometers. Above the lines, it says, the point of convergence. This is the place where the future of humanity comes to a point. It is a very important one for us. Humanity needs the security of safe, reliable patterns. By design, the need for leadership to guide and order society. The most important thing is, for humanity, to realize that it is hierarchical. Society needs to be ordered and guided, and there are those who guide and those who are guided, and those you order and those who are ordered. It is the nature of the logical way that the pattern is built on a hierarchical structure. Think about what the 7 does. It establishes a pattern, and because of the pattern being for the future, if that pattern can be expressed, it can become influential. We are looking at a classic example at what happens with the collective process. At the end of the Second World War, most of Asia was deeply poor, and the Americans, as they entered into Europe, invested in infrastructure in Japan. The Japanese started to make factories to produce goods that would be exported, not goods that would be for their own market. They became successful at that, as we all know. They became an enormously successful society, creating large infrastructure projects to create large amounts of manufactured goods to export into the world in order to make a living. That became a pattern that, by its very success, became influential, and that pattern was passed on to other Asian societies, so that we suddenly had an age of so-called Asian tigers. All of these Asian tigers together have been following this pattern for prosperity. They have been building all these factories in order to sell those goods overseas. Nobody paid attention to the fact that if you follow that pattern long enough, you get to a point where there is nothing but factories and nobody to buy the goods. In 1997, with Saturn in 21 now and before, because it has been in a retrograde process, we had an enormous financial crisis in the world. The logic system was there to provide us with secure patterns. Unfortunately, unless those patterns are properly tested and experimented with, we can always end up with difficulties, and then society goes into a state of chaos, because without the reliable pattern, everything falls apart. The vast majority of the middle class in Asia lost at least half of their life savings during the crisis in 1997. Humanity has been shocked by a pattern that appeared to operate properly, but when it finally got out to full maximum experimentation, suddenly it turned out to be an enormous problem. This pattern cannot be repaired because it is a pattern. What will be required is mutation, and that mutation does not exist in the world right now to be able to deal with that dilemma. It still has a long way to go before the cards are played out. The 7th gate is there to provide us with secure patterns for the future, but it does not mean that the pattern is necessarily going to work in the long run. This is what the individual role does. It knows that time is everything, and that only time is truly the test, but the logic system is desperate to get things out into the world, desperate to get the energy to get their experiment out into the world. The moment that an experiment works does not mean that we should jump on the bandwagon. It has to be tested over and over again. The nature of the role of the self in interaction. What is the role of leadership for humanity? We have 6 variations of this toll of leadership within the 6 lines of Gate 7. Walking through the 6 lines of the Gate 7, it's a process that will bring clarity to you in relation to nuances of the content and expression of the 7th gate. At the end, we will touch upon the crosses of Incarnation, where Gate 7 plays its role and become part of the purpose. Gate 7, Line 1, the authoritarian. The first line is the basis and foundation of all leadership. The foundation of leadership is obvious. It is authoritarian, and that is something for us to recognize. No matter how much we would like to see the equality in all things, it does not exist. What we have is vast differentiation, which creates an inherent hierarchy. The authoritarian. The iron hand, both enlightened and despotic. In other words, Authority will be either positive or negative because that depends on other factors. Sometimes it is both at the same time. Venus exalted, as in the basic values and rules imposed on a child. For most of our history, that is the way it worked. Those who ruled us assumed that we were rather infantile and had to be treated as children so that we would be able to survive. So we had kings and popes who ruled over us and thought about us to be rather immature and infantile and had to be looked after. We were their children. We belonged to them in that sense. The other side of the authoritarian is the distorted intellect that believes only it knows best. Whenever you meet people who have the 7.1 in detriment, it's advisable to tell them, good. If you only know best, good. If people do not agree with you, it's tough. Never look at what seems to be a negative line and say, you have to fix that. No, you have to live that. Like the optimist in the 13.6, the moment that you live that aspect, you will discover that it is good and bad. It is right and wrong. It is great and terrible. Don't get caught up in thinking that because there is a detriment, it means that it is inherently difficult. This is not true. Most people have trouble with their exaltations. In the White Book, the capacity of the self to guide with authority, or the capacity of the self to insist that its authority is best. Remember that it is a first line. Most people who have the 7.1 are trying to figure out what authority is. It is not that they are transpersonal, and they are ready to externalize that as an influence. When their opportunity comes, they must be authoritarian. It is the basis of leadership. Somebody has to be at the end of the line somewhere, all the time. That is the way it works. Gate 7, line 2, the Democrat. Obviously, this is a gate in which there is the capacity to lead. This is the role of the leader, and so when you come to the second line, this is somebody who does not know that they have the capacity to lead. It is other people who see it. This is the basis of what we call democracy. The moment that somebody is aware of that fact that they can lead, it is a different story. Others have to bring out this quality of leadership, and it speaks of the nature of our democratic system, which is based on leadership being dependent on society, providing the energy in that sense, that they provide the votes, as an example. So here we have the Democrat, an overview line, the ability to lead by serving the will of the majority. Of course, the whole thing about the Democrats is that they just don't know that. They don't know that they have the role. The role is found out, and the moment the role is found out, they have this opportunity that they can be brought into the democratic process. Neptune exalted. The application of universally accepted systems. When connected through the alpha channel to gate 31 influence, the potential for widespread and revolutionary effect on society. This is an essential ingredient for the maintenance of democracy in the world. For this generation that was born in 20th century, this is a second line that is very exalted in that sense, and it does have universal impact, because the universal impact is that logic only works out of the sharing process, and this is the best way to share leadership that we have. It was Churchill who said, "Democracy is not the best that is possible, but it is the best we have." Mercury in detriment. Elitism and denegation by Democrats of democracy. This is very common. The second line, the paper tiger, you look inside and it looks like they have that role, and you bring that role out in them, only to discover that they really would like to be dictators. It does not mean that they are democratic. It simply means that the possibility of that is there. Of course, this is a very common thing. The moment these people really get into power, the moment that they assume their role, those are the people who turn around and say, the very voters that voted for them are too dumb to vote for them again, and they have to manipulate them because they are not very intelligent. It was the same very unintelligent people that found out that these people had a role and put them up into that position. In the White Book, the capacity of the self to lead when chosen, very important, to lead when chosen, or the capacity of the self once chosen to feel superior to those who chose them. I am your leader, and therefore I am better than you. The second line is itself surprised to have been elected. The classic example for a 7.2 is Indira Gandhi. In looking at transits, you have to pay attention to the outer planets, because when they go through any particular gate or sequence of gates, you are going to have generations of people coming into the world that carry a similar kind of energy. One of the most interesting phenomena that are taking place since the Second World War is the level of diversity that exists in the nature of roles. For example, 60 or 70 years ago, if you had a doctor, the doctor was known as a general practitioner who came to your house when you were sick. He was a real doctor and did everything. If you take a look now in the Western world, you will find that there are thousands, literally thousands of different doctor roles. There is an enormous diversification that we have now. The reason for that is that we have a whole generation of people that came into the world after the Second World War, for example in 1948, that had Pluto in Leo. Pluto stayed there for a long time, impacting heavily on these role gates through their expression by being in 33, 31, 56, and 7. There was a very strong and long-term activation by Pluto there. Saturn was also there. There is a whole generation of people born around 1950 or 1960 that carried in them an enormous amount of potential to actualize roles in the world. It is a very common thing amongst this generation of people to have a lot of active role gates. Some of these people had Saturn in the third line of gate 7, as an example. I said that Saturn was there with Pluto. The anarchist is a very interesting place for Saturn to be. That is the last thing on Earth Saturn is associated with. Gate 7, line 3, the anarchist. The anarchist. An overview line. It is trial and error in finding a role. Remember, the parallel in the 13.3 is pessimism. That pessimism is inherent in the anarchist. My way of relating to this line is what Groucho Marx the comedian said: never belong to an organization that would have you as a member. And this is the nature of the 7.3, the rejection of any institutionalized order. You notice that it is an overview. It does not mean that you reject your mother because she has given you milk. It takes time before you get to the point where you realize, through trial and error, that the institutionalized way will not work, and you are not somebody that is waiting to be chosen. The moon exalted. The constant need for change no matter what the prevailing conditions. Mercury in detriment. The nihilist. In the White Book, the drive of the self to express many roles, or the capacity of the self to deny value in any role. It does not mean that these people do not get into the institutions. They do. Of course, the moment that they get in, they rebel against them and eventually have to leave in one way or another. There is a constant movement. On the detriment side, it can get to the point of just pure nihilism. Nothing works, so let's break everything. People really misunderstand anarchy. The 7.3 leader might like to be a burner of things. He may have burned so many things in life, he stayed there watching and enjoying. That is the anarchist. It burns so that something new may be built upon it. No guarantee that it will be something new, but the pessimism that says that whatever is there stinks, and unless we knock it down, nobody will build up anything new. The nature of the anarchist. Gate 7, line 4, the abdicator. When you are dealing with these roles, gates, the upper trigram, particularly the 4th and 5th lines, are always very significant because they have the opportunity to recognize how the role can get out. They know that there is a gate at the other end. When you come to the 7.4, the abdicator, you come to a line that is often misunderstood. The 4th line is one-tracked. Here, you have somebody who needs to externalize their role as a leader. They need to. It must come out for them. That is what they are here to do. They know that there is another side, so they know that they have to deal with that other side, because everybody in the 7th gate knows that logic requires energy, and the 4th line needs to compromise. Think about what the 4th line always represented in the 10.4, because it tells you so much about it. Opportunity. This is always a line of opportunism. If you have a lover, don't leave him or her until you have another lover. If you have a job, don't leave it until you have a new one. This is the nature of the 10.4. This is what opportunism is about. So it is important for the abdicator to realize that when the opportunity is there, they can externalize their role, but the opportunity comes and goes, and they won't always be able to externalize it. The willingness to accept either the judgment of the people or the rule of law. Leaders of Gate 7.4 should know and accept that their leadership role is of value until it is rejected, and then it is time to go on to something else. This is the Peter principle, which is to reach a level of incompetence. In other words, you get to a certain point where the majority no longer wants your leadership. It does not mean that your leadership is bad. It means that the majority is ready for another pattern. It means that your time is up. The Son exalted, the grace and wisdom to step down for the benefit of the whole. In the White Book, the capacity of the self to accept the judgment of others. Everything about the logical role demands that there will be collective backing for that role. It cannot work otherwise. It is not possible, even when you have the most vicious dictator. They did not get there alone. You can have the most vicious 7.1 you can imagine, connected in resonance to the 31.1. You can have the deepest darkness of leadership, and you have that person surrounded by those that are backing that. Nothing, no role, no leadership is possible. Who will lead them? There always has to be someone who wants them to lead. All roles in Gate 7 have to be voted for and backed. So, on one side is the ability to accept that you made me a leader. I have done my work. You don't want me to be leader anymore. Very good. I step down. There is nothing wrong with that. It means this is correct. But the moment that we get into the detriment, they stay in power. The refusal of the self to accept the judgment of others. In the Black Book, Uranus and detriment. One who must be forced from power by overwhelming opposition. Like the listener in the 13.4, they are so busy externalizing that they forget that it has its limitations. If you keep on listening and you don't take a rest, you get ill. If you keep on trying to lead when your time is up, you breed revolt. It is what we see in the world all the time. You get somebody into power and everybody is excited. They are wonderful and get voted in. They can be democratic, they can be any kind, and then they just stay there and don't go away. And their time of leadership, their time of value is over, and everybody knows that it is over. What they are doing now is that they are filling their pockets and their children's pockets. For example, a guy that is running for the 7th time. He can barely breathe, for God's sake. This is what this is about. In other words, one tracked in living out the role and yet not realizing that the role has to come to an end, and so instead of them becoming sick, somebody makes them sick. These are people that get the plug pulled out. These are people that have their telephones disconnected, like Mobutu in Zaire, who transformed from national hero to king of thieves. He was valuable to the country as he brought a new pattern. By now, he has already outlived his purpose and is now filling his children's pockets until the country's had enough and puts him into exile. It's not like they are not supposed to have a role. They are here to be wonderful leaders and then give up. These are the kind of people that accept to be the chancellor for Germany for 1 term, and after 5 years, they go home. They did their job. They did what they wanted to do for the people. The people are satisfied, and then they step down because it is time for somebody else to take over the job. In that sense, it is very exalted. It is the first line's harmony. It is limited authority in terms of time span. That is what we have in our political systems. We try to limit the authority of our elected officials. We say that they can only be in power for 4 years, or they can only run twice, or whatever. This is what we are establishing out of the 4th line. Gate 7, line 5, the general. The line of projection. The 5th line in its harmony to the 2nd line. The 5th line that is always waiting to be the savior, like the 13.5 of democracy, the general. The whole thing about being a 7.5 is that everybody projects on you that you are the one that should lead, whether you are equipped to lead or not. Anybody who has the 7.5 has to pay a lot of attention to the fact that they are called on in life to lead, and if they can fulfill that, obviously their reputation will grow. The whole thing about this is that it is projected on. Leadership whose authority must be absolute and is sanctioned by society in times of crisis. That is when these people are important. In the harmony to democracy, society will give up its democratic leader when it is in trouble. This line is patterned on the ancient Greek community, in which there was a relative democracy. But when they got into trouble, they would go to one of their military commanders, one of their generals, and they said, "Look, we are in a lot of trouble. We will give up our democratic ways, and we ask you to be dictator until you defeat our enemies. By the way, when the enemies are defeated, we want you to allow us to go back and be a nice democracy, and we will give you a pension, and we will have a parade for you, and everything will be terrific." This is what is expected. This is what humanity sees as the greatest value of a leader, which is that the leader is there to guide us in times of crisis. This is when leaders are important to us. If you go back through history, those leaders that are remembered are leaders that took their people through a time of trial or turmoil or war. So the general, this form of leadership, is called upon in times of crisis. In other words, these are not people to be involved in a day-to-day leadership. They are called to leadership in times of crisis. Venus exalted, the gift of attracting loyally necessary and harmonizing the potential of society. Again, it is a very important social context here in the most transpersonal of these lines, the capacity of the self through its role to attract loyalty. It attracts loyalty before it starts. There are all kinds of people that say, "Look, we are in trouble, and I know that General so-and-so could really help us." The loyalty is already there, because when this 7.5 is around, people always project on it. You know, he or she would be the best leader. He or she would be able to solve our problem. The Neptune in detriment. The commander isolated from his troops and obsessed with victory at any price. In the White Book, the lack of loyalty when the self insists on isolation. This is a very common thing that happens to 7.5, which is they do not show up in times of crisis. They stay isolated, and the fact that they are isolated when there is crisis all along makes everybody else nervous. As a matter of fact, 7.5 are the kinds of people that, whoever is in authority, may even find them to be very threatening, because they know that, if they came out into public, they would be strong leaders and might challenge their own role. All projected fifth lines do not necessarily want to participate in the process. They want to be selective about when they take leadership. They are not fourth lines. They are not there to lead all the time. So in the detriment, when the 7.5 does not show up, does not come around and make itself available in times of crisis, there are those that can actually find that threatening. That are the ones who are trying to fulfill that role themselves. So the general has these two sides to it, but always remember, it is coming from the projected field. It is coming from the need in times of crisis because humanity is in trouble, because society is in danger and is threatened. But as long as that role is not offered in times of crisis, then the person itself becomes somebody that is considered to be dangerous, isolated from its troops, isolated from its supporters that are out there saying, "We really need you to come now and help us because we are in so much trouble." There is this wonderful story of the Messiah coming into the world. He comes into the world, he hangs around for a while, then he checks everything out and he starts teaching a few people and he says, "You know, I don't feel like doing this. Everybody is projecting on me that I am the Messiah, and I feel like somebody who wants to farm." So the Messiah gives up and goes and sits on a farm. Because the presence is there and the projected power of the Savior is there, all kinds of people get upset and they kill him because he would not play his role as Messiah. It is a very nice story. very typical of the 7.5 in detriment. The lack of loyalty when the self insists on isolation. Gate 7, line 6. The administrator. Sixth lines are always so strange. Remember the optimist in the 13.6? Because it helps to understand the administrator in the Gate 7, line 6. Everything about the sixth line is about sitting and looking, paying attention to what is there in the circuitry. The moment you get to the 7.6, you actually get to a great deal of pressure because the logical circuitry is so important. The right patterns for humanity are so important. But there is something else. The optimist in the 13.6 carries with it an optimism or a hope that any interaction is important. And the mystical beauty of the 7.6 is the recognition that all human beings are leaders, all of them, and that they all have a role in this life. And that can be very beautiful. So here in the administrator is an overview line, the ability to share and justly distribute power. Think about the 7.6 child. It is 5 years old, and it says to its father, "You should really organize your time better. I know exactly what you should do, and mother, I know exactly what you should do." How long will that kid live? The fact is that every time that you look at any line and you see it in the context of a child, you automatically will understand how distorted our schooling and education have been. If you don't know the nature of the child, then how is it even possible to nurture their being? You can't. You can only respond to that in your own conditioning. So the moment that this child begins to administrate, the first thing that happens is that it is told to shut up and mind its own business, and it learns to sit on the roof, and it learns to watch what is going on. Mercury exalted, the power to communicate the frameworks of responsibility. The fact is that because of their perspective and recognition of the importance of the whole logical process, they recognize that many, many roles are involved. That is a real gift, to be able to see them. In the White Book, the capacity of the self through its role to communicate responsibility. A 7.6 does not need a guru or a master. Everybody can be their own chief. This is classic of the 7 line 6, Uranus in detriment. The bureaucrat whose lust for power eventually destabilizes the organization. The capacity to recognize clearly what roles people should have also leads to possibilities of power and abuse. The fact is that it does not happen all that often. Yes, it is there. You are not really going to see a person of 7.6 who will be active in the direct leadership business. What you will see out of the 7.6 is the creation of what we call bureaucracies, the Egyptian disease, where you have administrators who administrate the state, and it just gets bigger and bigger, and everybody has a role. In that way, out of the detriment comes abuse of those powers, where the entrenched bureaucracy, the administrators, have more power than those that are elected. Recognize that most 7.6, by the time that they are adults, by the time that they get into their 20s, have already given up on the business of being leaders, and they tend to be very good at pointing out what other people can do. Everyone can be a leader. The 7.6 then leads to the 4.1. This is quite a process. Timing is everything. You have to wait for the right time. Pleasure in Gate 4, line 1, cannot be achieved without perfect timing. This goes back to the whole business of what it is to be in direction anyway. Now let's move on to a different perspective to see how the 7th gate sustain or communicate the purpose of life through the crosses of incarnation that are established when the conscious sun is placed within the 7th gate. 7th hexagram, right angle cross of the Sphinx. 3, consisting of following gates 7, 13, 2, 1. People of influence, equipped to lead, whose sound logic and attention to the past play a key role in directing humanity toward a secure future. As the cross of the Sphinx, you bring leadership to guide and direct as your energy supports vision for the future. This is probably the most active cross of seeking leadership, but the drive for leadership in you will depend on your profile and the rest of your chart's composition. Fundamentally, You have the design to look at past patterns and project where they are moving to. This is your greatest asset to bring forth in your leadership. Juxtaposition, cross of interaction, consisting of following gates 7, 13, 23, 43. People who are always looking for ways to live out their leadership role, to be of influence without being influenced. Leading by accepting diversity. Your cross is driven to be involved in leadership. This is not necessarily taking the lead, but may manifest as an individual contributor to something bigger. You will feel compelled to have a foot in the door in politics or other organizations that provide leadership. Your cross carries gates of leadership to support you in this endeavor, and your fourth line profile can contribute to provide opportunity through your social network. Is this always a fourth line profile? Left angle cross of masks 2, consisting of following gates 7, 13, 23, 43. People who are projected upon to provide practical or wise leadership, to be influential change agents. They do so at their best from behind a mask or title, such as the general or therapist. Your cross is expected to lead when there is a dire need for someone to step forward and provide a solution. With this energy, there will be an expectation for you to come through and save the day. Preparation is key for you, as the expectations are large. Make sure you are ready for the task at hand, or turn it down as the consequences of failure may be great. I hope this material is helpful and supporting for the development of your human design knowledge. Please share if you enjoyed listening, and subscribe if you want to be notified about any new posting of informative learning materials regarding human design. Thank you.